Hola, I'm Alex Perez, national correspondent with ABC News, and thank you so much for streaming with us. This year, more than 32 million Latinos will be eligible to vote in the upcoming election. 32 million. Now, here are a few facts. Latinos live all over our beautiful country, from east to west, north to south, from barrios and the inner city to suburbs, small towns, and the heartland. Most Latinos are primarily English language dominant, but many of us also hablamos español. As is the case for so many other Americans, Latinos are defined by faith, family, and food, but also shaped by their struggle and success. In this unprecedented presidential election with so much on the line,
get out and vote.
We'll always have your back, I promise you, so please vote.
the time
Latinos will determine who the next president of the United States is.
to let your voices be heard is now. Get ready, because we are about to take an in-depth look at Latinos in America, how they came here, their countless struggles, and their enormous contributions, and how all of that could influence how they may vote at the ballot box.
I vote. Yo voto.
I vote.
Yo voto.
I vote. Yo voto.
I vote.
Yo voto.
Yo voto.
You better vote. Yo voto.
Sí se puede con el voto.
America's future, the power of the Latino vote. And now, please join my colleagues, Tom Llamas, Cecilia Vega, and John Quiñones from ABC News World Headquarters in New York.
Thanks, Alex, and good evening. We stand here tonight just days away from the most consequential American election in decades. We've seen voters turning out in record numbers, tens of millions of ballots already cast, a multitude of issues driving voters to the polls, including America's 32 million eligible Latino voters.
Yeah, ours is a community that is all too often overlooked, even though we are one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in this country. And in this election year tonight, we will hear from Latinos from coast to coast about the issues that matter the most right now: the coronavirus pandemic, jobs, the economy, healthcare, and immigration.
Such important issues, and we want to begin with the enormous contributions Latinos have made to our way of life here in America and how we got to this very critical point in time. So it only seemed fitting to ask legendary Emmy, Grammy, Tony, and Oscar winner, yes, an EGOT winner, Rita Moreno, to take us through it.
A legacy that goes from the Olmecs to the Mayans, whose empires predate the birth of Christ, to the Aztecs and the Incas, whose empires existed and thrived for hundreds of years before the arrival and invasion of European settlers and their introduction of African slave trade to the Western Hemisphere. The Latino identity has a rich and complex ancestry. The Aztecs ruled over an estimated 15 million people. The empire stretched from what today is known as the United States borderlands through southern Mexico. At its peak, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan had over 140,000 people. Just south of the Aztecs were the Mayans, who were known for their advanced pyramid building, astronomy, and mathematics. Their agricultural technology developed the basis of what is the majority of the world's diet. As you make your way down to what is now known as South America, we find the Incas. At its peak, the Incan Empire was made up of 12 million people. Today, one of the most sacred archaeological centers of the Incas is a modern wonder of the world, Machu Picchu. The Taínos and Carib peoples navigated from the coast of South America to the Caribbean islands, named after the Caribs themselves. Once the most numerous indigenous people of the Caribbean, the Taino population may have reached anywhere between 1 or 2 million at the time of the Spanish conquest in the late 15th century. The Spaniards' quest for land didn't end there. By 1513, they arrived to a land with many flowers that they named Florida. Unknown to many, the first European language spoken in what is now the United States of America was actually Spanish and not English. The conquistadores brought with them diseases such as smallpox, mumps, and measles. They also brought with them one of the worst abuses of humankind, slavery. About 15 times as many African slaves were taken to Spanish and Portuguese colonies than to the U.S. The Spanish Empire would dominate throughout the Western Hemisphere for hundreds of years. Finally, in the early 1800s, the majority of Latin American countries and their people would gain their independence except Cuba and Puerto Rico. For Mexico, the victory would be short-lived thanks to their neighbors, the United States. The U.S. wasn't content with what it had, pushing westward to seize the land that many presidents believed was America's destiny. To reach that goal, President James Polk provoked war with Mexico. After a long and bloody battle, there was an agreement called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexico signed the treaty under the promise the U.S. would recognize all Mexicans as citizens of their new nation. But the U.S. failed on its promise, granting only white Mexican citizenship and leaving indigenous and black Mexicans entirely disenfranchised. This would forever change the fate of generations of Mexican Americans to come, and in turn, mold the identity of all Latinos in the United States.
Latinos and Hispanics are the future of American voting. By November 3rd, more Latinos will be eligible to vote on Election Day than ever before. You heard the number, 32 million. With the help of Get Out the Vote rallies such as those in Florida and Arizona, more than 800,000 of us become eligible to vote every year. By 2025, that number will swell to 1 million. Each person with their own story, their own opinion, their own vote.
I'm an American of Mexican descent. Proud of my race, proud of my heritage, my ethnicity, and I'm proud of what my family has done.
Renato Ramirez is living his American dream in Texas, running the ranch his parents bought in 1940, the year he was born.
And they were able to buy this 4,000-acre ranch and make it a success and get us educated.
Ramirez is one of 32 million Latinos eligible to vote in the upcoming election, the largest non-white electorate.
Most of us have the same common goal. We all want to educate our children. We all want them to have a good economic life.
He's not alone. 80% of Hispanic voters say the economy is their top priority in the 2020 election, followed closely by health care.
There's a lot of issues that are affecting us right now. We're living under a pandemic, so unemployment is one of them, Medicaid.
The economy and worker rights is a very important issue.
Healthcare, immigration,
access to affordable healthcare.
Healthcare is really important to me because my dad actually was sick when he was undocumented and couldn't get any sort of healthcare.
The old neighborhood, I love this place. Welcome back.
Back in my hometown of San Antonio, I sat down with the most visible Latino face on the campaign trail this year, Julian Castro.
The issues that matter to the Hispanic community are the issues that matter to all Americans, right?
Castro was the only Latino to run for president in 2020. His campaign ran on progressive policies like Medicare for all and raising the minimum wage.
Companies across the United States are making more and more profit, but not passing that down to the people that make that profit for them.
His presidential bid failed, but those policies proved popular with many Latino voters.
Se vive, se siente, Bernie es presidente.
Progressive Latino voters helped Bernie Sanders win Nevada, Colorado, and California. And with 40% support, they kept him in the race in Texas. By the next presidential election, the number of Latinos in Texas is expected to surpass the white population.
You think Texas is a swing state now?
Yeah, we are a swing state. The last 10 to 12 polls showed the presidential race here basically tied. And if we can win here, then it's game over for the Republicans. And the Latino vote is going to play a huge role.
Nationwide, Biden is outpacing President Trump by more than 30 points among registered Latino voters.
ABC Election Night 2016.
They were really hoping that the Latino vote would come out in both Arizona and Colorado.
But in 2016, less than half of registered Latino voters showed up at the polls.
2016 has taught us very painfully that elections matter.
This year, there's a focused effort to mobilize Latino voters. Celebrities making a push to get out the vote, endorsing candidates.
I'm here representing women and moms and Latinos.
Appearing at conventions and hitting the campaign trail for both candidates.
That makes Donald Trump our head coach. And when you're winning Super Bowls, you don't fire the coach.
Turnout among Latino voters is expected to increase by 15% in the upcoming election.
Who will you be voting for in November?
I already voted. I voted for Mr. Trump.
Why Trump?
The economy. Bottom line.
Today, Renato Ramirez's wealth extends into the millions. And for that reason, he says, a vote for Trump isn't personal, it's just smart business.
But you've done so well for yourself. You've been very successful. What do you tell other Americans, other Latinos who don't have those investments?
I don't know what to tell them. I just don't know. I mean, it's develop commitment, develop a discipline, work hard, and you know, that's basically how I did it. You know.
What about what Trump has said about immigrants, Mexican immigrants?
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
The thing is, he's not a politician. Those are kind of stupid remarks that he has made.
Ramirez is among the nearly 30% of Latino voters who support President Trump.
A lot of Latino supporters are not understanding the impact that Trump has on the Latino population.
Sema Hernandez is a political activist and the mother of 4. She ran for Senate against Beto O'Rourke in 2018.
Before I started running for office, I was coaching Little League Baseball and breastfeeding my baby in the dugout. I don't see any men that are doing things that women are doing, especially women of color.
She spent just $4,000 on her campaign, but gained nearly 25% of the vote.
I outperformed in places where most Democrats don't perform very well.
She credits her success to appealing to Latinos as Americans. That proved a winning strategy for President George W. Bush in 2004.
I'm proud to call Latinos Americans, and I'm proud to be your president. God bless and welcome to life.
He made Latinos feel like they had a seat at the table.
This year, it's Latino voters in Florida, Arizona, and Texas that experts say could decide the election.
Latinos need to understand that our voices matter, that if we want respect, if we want to be part of this country, we must vote.
Still ahead on this ABC News Live special, Americans voting in the heart of the pandemic.
Yeah, the alarming projections, roughly 230,000 American lives lost by Election Day. Tonight, why the virus has particularly devastated the Latino community.
And coming up, the devastating toll of COVID-19 and why that virus is driving so many Latino voters to the polls.
Welcome back. The coronavirus pandemic is soaring at an alarming rate across the United States. Hospitalizations on the rise in state after state. But listen to this. A sobering report shows Latinos are 3 times as likely to test positive for COVID-19, 5 times as likely to be hospitalized, and twice as likely to die from it. One of America's top medical experts delivering an alarming warning to Congress, calling this pandemic the historic decimation of Latinos in this country. ABC's Victor Akendo has more.
The sounds of the mariachi are unmistakable. From the gold trumpets to the strumming guitarrón. But today, the music that so often marks life's joyful moments at weddings and quinceañeras is playing at this funeral mass.
We are here to say farewell to the loved ones who lost the battles against COVID-19.
We asked and decided to do it now in October because it's from the Dia de los Muertos.
The people here, a tight-knit community of Mexican immigrants from Chinantla, Puebla, honoring loved ones that never received a proper goodbye.
When they hear our notes and our songs, our lyrics, we want them to feel that they're in Mexico, that they're there with their families, connect them in some kind of way.
Eric Pérez Cantor, Justo Calixto Andón.
Their photos, a reminder of lives cut short from a disease that has ravaged communities like this one. According to the CDC, Latinos are dying at a disproportionately high rate from COVID-19. A recent analysis of more than 114,000 COVID-related deaths between May and August found 24% were Hispanic or Latino, despite being only 18% of the U.S. population.
Paula Felipe Ramos.
Lucero Martinez Felipe has waited 6 months for this day. Her mother Paula died on April 16th, just 3 weeks after getting sick with COVID-19.
I miss her, and I needed to find certain peace in myself, and I think today I was able to actually feel peace for the first time since the day of her passing.
At the time, cases of the coronavirus growing exponentially in New York City, quickly becoming the epicenter of the global pandemic.
Health officials fearing another deadly wave on the way.
Here at NYU, COVID testing tents have been set up for students.
Illinois breaking its own record of new cases.
Fast forward to a week before the 2020 presidential election, a profound transformation to our way of life. Hospitals once again stretched to the limits to care for a new wave of COVID patients in places like Utah and Wisconsin. The U.S. surpassing a staggering 8 million cases. One of them, President Donald Trump.
Don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it.
That message, after the president left Walter Reed Medical Center, was a gut punch for Lucero.
He's privileged. Did every single person that lost their lives receive the same treatment that he did? They didn't. He had all these resources that none of us did.
At least 225,000 lives have been lost, the numbers growing every day. The COVID-19 outbreak becoming a top issue for Latino voters.
I think I always knew who I would not vote for, and it definitely won't be for the one that just stood there and watched it happen and didn't do much to help us.
Dr. Peter Hotez, one of the world's leading experts on vaccines, is growing more alarmed by the data.
What we're seeing really is historic decimation among the Hispanic community by this virus.
From the Rio Grande Valley to the big cities, a troubling pattern emerging throughout the nation.
Given the fact that it's hitting Hispanics in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, what that really means is it's robbing families for this whole generation of their mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters.
For brothers Isaiah and Nathan Garcia, it is their painful reality, losing both parents to the virus in Houston this summer, just 2 weeks apart.
I didn't get to say goodbye to my mom or my dad now. And that's what hurts me the most right now.
It's been really devastating, and not only in terms of the number of people who are dying, but also affecting a much younger age group.
Elizabeth Romero saw COVID-19 sweep through her Long Beach community.
I was like, we're strong, we're young, we're healthy. We could get through this. I never knew it was going to take my husband away.
Elizabeth was on the phone with her husband, Jose, who was in the hospital bed when he suddenly went into cardiac arrest.
And the machine's just going off like crazy. 45 minutes I was on the phone. They tried 45 minutes to bring him back. And I'm like, no, not my husband, he cannot be gone.
Her life and the lives of so many others shattered by COVID-19.
Why are Latino communities getting hit so hard by this pandemic?
We are essential workers, much more likely to be essential workers. We have to be out there. In the pandemic, some of them had to take public transportation. There was no choice. Also, many of us live in more crowded housing, places of higher social density. All those things have been a major issue why Latinos are at higher risk.
Dr. Olvin Carrasquillo, a Puerto Rican native and chief of internal medicine at the University of Miami Health System, is determined to help his community. He's leading one of the clinical trials for the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine and is calling for more diverse participants.
We need more minorities, both Latino, African American, to participate in these studies. We need to make sure these vaccines work on our people.
He says health disparities among Latinos are compounded by one's immigration status and lack of health care coverage.
They would say, no quería venir, pero no me quiero morir, which means I didn't want to come, but I didn't want to die. And you see these young persons with immigration issues that really didn't want to come. They worked down in the fields in Homestead. They came in really sick with extremely low oxygenation status. And you could tell, you saw the fear in their eyes.
Homestead, Florida, just 40 miles south of Miami's famous beaches and nightlife, where these farm workers toil in extreme heat harvesting food.
This is the invisible workforce that kind of uplifts the country, and yet the country is not uplifting them. And we have to kind of start changing our mentality and thinking, you know, the farm workers that feed us, maybe they need to come first. They have to be the first in line to get the resources and the help that they need.
The fear of bringing the virus home, all too common for Latino essential workers, many of whom live in multi-generational households.
La enfermedad no sabíamos cuánto nos iba a desarrollar, si íbamos a acabar en un hospital, si íbamos a fallecer, qué iba a ser de nuestros hijos.
And with the temperatures cooling, more families are expected to hunker down together indoors. The nation's top infectious disease specialist, Dr. Anthony Fauci, warning that the number of deaths could grow to 400,000 if precautions aren't taken this fall and winter.
One of the biggest holidays for Latinos, Christmas Eve, Nochebuena. You're saying it should look different this year.
Look, my brother bought a house, we're all planning this big lechon and all this stuff, and now we don't know. How do you have Nochebuena without a lot of people? If you ask me right now, that's what I would recommend. Small event, especially if I had older people in my family, which we all do. You know, there's no way I would want my mom to be in a social setting with 30 people. That's just not what I would want, as hard as it is for us.
That right there, the stark, heartbreaking reminder as America's death toll rises. Every number has a face, a name, and a story.
Abuelos, padres, madres, hermanos, hermanas, hijos y hijas. Those are just a fraction of those we have lost to COVID. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. They were the searing images igniting outrage across the country. Migrant children separated from their parents at the southern border. Now, an explosive new report on the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy making this an election issue. Lawyers say they can't find the parents of 545 migrant children still living with sponsor families in the U.S. Tonight, what's become of those families separated and reunited?
As President Trump makes his closing argument on why he deserves 4 more years, one of the darkest chapters of his presidency, child separation, is coming back to haunt him, even on the debate stage.
So how will these families ever be reunited?
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people.
Vice President Joe Biden firing back with a counterpoint.
Coyotes didn't bring them over. Their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents.
And according to the ACLU, the battle over child separation is far from over.
We now believe that there were close to 5,500 families separated. What this administration did, taking little babies, toddlers, but even teenagers away from their parents in a strange country, not telling the parent where they were taking the child.
The enforcement is part of the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy.
The Department of Homeland Security is now referring 100% of illegal southwest border crossings to the Department of Justice for prosecution.
The plan touted by then Attorney General Jeff Sessions, a deterrent the administration hoped would make people think twice about crossing the border illegally.
If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally.
One of those kids? A Brazilian asylum seeker named James, who was just 14 years old at the time when he was separated from his mother.
Do you remember the moment they took you away from your mom?
Yes, I remember. Like I was really shocked. I didn't have no reaction, like no feeling about anything. I was just paralyzed.
As the policy became more widespread, immigration rights groups started sounding the alarm. White House officials like former Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen forced to answer questions.
If that parent has a 4-year-old child, what do you plan on doing with that child?
The child under law goes to HHS for care and custody.
They will be separated from their parent.
Just like we do in the United States every day.
Amid the growing backlash, the president at one point blaming Democrats.
The Democrats gave us that law. It's a horrible thing. We have to break up families.
Lawmakers and immigration rights activists said that just wasn't true. Parents and kids left stunned and confused.
So they take you away, and at that moment, do you know what's happening? Do you even understand?
No, I didn't know anything because they just took me away, and we couldn't understand anything. Was because I didn't know the language.
Even the president's own wife denounced child separation when I sat down with her in Kenya.
You know, it was under your husband's policy, the zero tolerance policy, that these families were separated, that enforcement. Is this somewhere where you disagreed with him?
Yes, and I let him know. I didn't know that policy will come out. I was blindsided by it. I told him at home, and I said to him that I feel that's unacceptable, and he felt the same.
But last month, in leaked audio tapes to CNN by the First Lady's former advisor, Melania Trump is heard discussing her visit to the border at the height of the scandal.
All these kids that I met, they are here in the shelters because they were brought by it through coyotes. The kids, they say, "Wow, I will have my own bed." It's so sad to hear it, but they didn't have that in their own countries.
On the White House website, the First Lady reacted to the leaked audio tapes in a statement, saying her words were taken out of context. The president eventually surrendered on child separation, signing an executive order ending it. But now, more than 2 years later, the ACLU says they have been unable to reach the parents of more than 500 migrant children taken from their families at the border before June of 2018.
We are still looking for hundreds and hundreds of families where the parent was deported without the child.
Both the Department of Homeland Security and the White House refuting the accusations.
It's very sad. The administration wants the families to be reunited, but for various reasons, the families just have not accepted the children back in many of these cases.
The ACLU challenges that explanation, saying, quote, "We have not even found these 545 parents, so neither we nor certainly the administration can know whether they want to be reunited."
We're going to stop the inhumane practice of separating children from their parents and work to reunite families. Look at all the families that are not reunited.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is making sure voters don't forget about child separation, especially Latino voters.
We're going to restore sensible enforcement priorities and stop terrorizing Latino communities.
One group following both candidates but unable to vote, the families who are still here and caught in the middle of the child separation legal battle. We were there in 2018 when James was reunited with his mother Jocelyn after 9 months. The mother and son had to flee their native Brazil because Jocelyn says she was being abused by her husband. She says when they were crossing the border illegally, her son was taken away by immigration officials. He would end up more than 1,000 miles away in a facility in Chicago.
It was horrible, so painful for me as a mother because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Jocelyn would take refuge in a shelter near El Paso, Texas, as she waited to hear about her asylum claim. We spoke to her at the border as she just started her legal battle to get her son back.
Sabiendo ahora.
I asked her then if, knowing what happened to her son, would she still have crossed the border?
It's horrible there and horrible here.
For so many parents, like Jocelyn, they feel they have no choice. We recently caught up with them to see how their life has been going.
I think that despite everything that happened, it was an experience for us, but I still think things can be fixed. I don't think only bad things are to come.
How is your life right now in the U.S.?
It's going great. Like I'm doing like really great. It's been like really good since like we're starting doing school and starting like socializing with people and learning a different culture.
Now, mother and son are living in Massachusetts. Jocelyn tells me she doesn't focus on the past and has hope they can both stay here, together.
I think a person can't live happily thinking in the past and what happened because it was so painful. It was horrible. But now we're together, and we're good, thank God. And I hope we stay that way.
When we come back, the race for president with the future of DACA and the dreamers at stake.
Yes, so many of them frontline workers right in the middle of this pandemic, not just facing the coronavirus on a daily basis, but also living in fear of being deported at any moment. We're now going to turn to the heated battle over immigration in America. More than 600,000 dreamers living and working in the United States, many healthcare workers on the front lines of this very pandemic, and they also live in constant fear of being deported. They are not only caught in the middle of a stalemate in Washington, their futures may depend on the outcome of this presidential election, which will determine if they are allowed to stay in this country, their home. As a paramedic outside of Houston, Jesus Contreras' job is stressful enough. But these days, work isn't the only thing keeping him up at night.
My head's obviously in my immigration status, the likelihood of me, being deported or losing status.
Jesus was born in Mexico, but he's lived in the United States ever since he and his family immigrated illegally when he was just 6 years old. Now 27, this is home. He graduated from high school, attended junior college, became an EMT, helping to rescue his community from the floods of Hurricane Harvey. But Jesus and the 640,000 other young people just like him who have temporary legal status now live in limbo. They have no idea whether they will be allowed to stay in this country legally or face deportation.
I think I've established my life here in the United States, and I've been here for the majority of my life. And for me to potentially be sent back home to Mexico, quote unquote home, would be devastating not only to me, but to my community, my employer, my family, my friends.
It was the Obama administration back in 2012 that extended legal protections for these young people known as dreamers, brought to the country illegally as children.
They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
The program known as DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, allowed dreamers to come out of the shadows, to go to school and work, all without fear of deportation. And today, they make up the fabric of America. 90% have jobs, including 27,000 in healthcare, working on the front lines in the fight against COVID. Nearly half are enrolled in school. Some barely even speak the language of the countries where they were born. English is how they communicate. Americans in both parties overwhelmingly support protecting dreamers, yet these young people are once again stuck in the middle of a political fight over how to reform the country's immigration laws. Even as an immigration hardliner, President Trump early on said under his watch, dreamers had nothing to fear. Should dreamers be worried?
We love the dreamers. We love everybody. Thank you very much.
But he used protecting them from deportation as a bargaining chip, hoping to get Congress to fund his border wall in exchange. Once tweeting, "If there is no wall, there is no DACA." The administration repeatedly punting, blaming Congress for not doing more to protect dreamers. Could this White House envision a scenario in which these dreamers are deported? Would that be something the president is okay with?
At this point, the president is willing to sign something to find a permanent solution for DACA, and he has placed the responsibility, which the Constitution has placed, and he has reminded the Congress that it is their job to actually get that legislation passed and send it to him. Again, he's going to play a big role in the process, but it's on Congress to get that legislation through the two bodies and hit the president's desk.
But Congress has tried and failed more than a dozen times to pass protections for these dreamers, coming up empty every single time. And in this election year, given the state of the economy and the surging coronavirus, there is once again little incentive for action. Democratic challenger Joe Biden promises executive action to protect dreamers on day one if he's elected.
I'm going to once again legalize all the DACA students. These DACA students are more Americans than most Americans are.
He also says he'll send a bill to Congress to outline a path to citizenship for DACA recipients. But unless his party controls both chambers on Capitol Hill, that promise is easier said than done. The former director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services under President Obama says the Dreamers are being used as pawns in a dangerous political game.
The Dreamers are logically part of the overall picture of immigration and border security. And so as a result of that, the president has tried to leverage a path of some kind of relief for the Dreamers in exchange for concessions that he wants, for things above all, the border wall. The tragedy of that is that the issue of the Dreamers should have been resolved a long time ago.
This summer, many Dreamers breathed a sigh of relief when the Supreme Court delivered a stunning blow, rejecting the White House's attempt to end DACA.
This decision means that I will be able to apply to residency programs and hopefully achieve my dream of becoming a surgeon.
You know, I'm not going to stop until we have a pathway towards citizenship.
But the High Court made it clear the president does have the right to end the program as long as he does it properly. So far, the White House has not filed a new case. Yet even as President Trump has repeatedly threatened to go back to court, just recently at an election town hall in Miami, he was back to claiming he wants to help Dreamers.
We are going to take care of DACA. We're going to take care of Dreamer. We want people to come into our country. They have to come in legally. But we are working very hard on the DACA program, and you will be, I think, very happy over the course of the next year.
For people like Jesus, it's just more of the same head-spinning uncertainty.
At the end of the day, I think whether it's President Trump or President Biden, there is going to be change. We're at a point in time where the young folks that are growing up and are able to vote and speak up are seeing that DACA recipients are truly hardworking people.
He can't vote in this election, but he's hoping those that do make sure their vote means real, lasting change in the only country he's ever really known.
Still ahead on this ABC News Live special, Latino businesses struggling to survive in the U.S. economy after surging for more than a decade.
Families with their livelihoods on the line, why Hispanic business owners were less likely to receive a PPP loan from the federal government. Back now with the economy playing such a pivotal role in the presidential election. With $1.5 trillion in purchasing power and an estimated $500 billion in annual revenue coming from Latino-owned businesses alone, there's no denying Latinos are essential to the success of our country, many generating wealth through small businesses. So how will business owners vote? Here's ABC's Stephanie Ramos.
When Luciana Gomez came to the U.S. from Argentina 19 years ago, she didn't know that owning a business would be in her future.
I'm not gonna tell you that coming here, it was my plan to have my own business because I never thought I would. If anything, this country helped me discover that passion that I had.
When the pandemic hit, like many small business owners, Gomez applied for the Paycheck Protection Program loan.
I thought the process would be easier, and it wasn't, to the point where I was kind of in tears because I would watch on TV that the money was almost gone.
Research from Stanford University shows that Latino business owners were approved for the PPP loan at half the rate of white business owners. Gomez dipped into her savings to stay afloat.
Nobody really seemed to care, and I was to the point of desperation because I felt like I didn't have the money to keep going.
A neighbor suggested she go through a community bank where she received a $15,000 loan a week later. The pandemic is one of many hurdles Gomez has faced as an entrepreneur. In the beginning, what were some of the challenges that you as a Latina woman faced?
I think the system is not easy to navigate from financial perspective to taxes to hiring and things of that nature. I think people don't necessarily take you seriously when you have an accent.
Gomez has already cast her ballot for Vice President Joe Biden and tells us that she votes not just for herself, but her community.
I like his policies. I just feel like I would be better represented. But again, it's not just about me or my business. My decision this year has to do with the bigger picture of the country and where this country is going. So you cannot think about a good economy without taking Latinos into account.
According to a recent study, the total economic output of Latinos in the U.S. was more than $2.6 trillion in 2018.
Latinos want to support policies that impact them and their businesses.
Despite Latinos' massive impact on the U.S. economy, many business owners struggle to see growth.
Non-Latino business owners earn nearly $1.5 trillion more than Latinx businesses. What's driving that gap is access to external capital.
There are a projected 5 million Latino-owned businesses in the U.S., but research from Stanford University shows that only 3% of those businesses earn over $1 million in annual revenue. Ryan Betancourt is a Cuban-American entrepreneur and one of the few Latinos running a business he says is worth millions.
Our last valuation was over $35 million. I'm a biotech entrepreneur and CEO.
He ventured into the Shark Tank in 2019, looking for capital to bolster his burgeoning business.
It's time to get serious with how we feed our pets.
$550,000, 10% of the company, and then we have a deal.
His company's success is a big step up from his family's humble beginnings.
My family originally came to the U.S. as Cuban refugees and became entrepreneurs once they settled in Miami. My mother and my father actually started a small plumbing business.
His family is like so many others, diverse yet divided.
I think that my own family encompasses a lot of what we see across America. From my aunts who support Donald Trump through to my mother who actually supports Biden, we all love each other. We all care deeply about each other. But sometimes some of the divisions are pretty strong.
Betancourt is voting for Vice President Joe Biden in November and says his personal values translate to his politics.
What's really driving my decision are the things that I care deeply about, which is about science, climate change and sustainability, and caring about people and our pets.
While Betancourt is casting his vote for Biden, in Arizona, a key swing state, restaurant owner Jorge Rivas is a proud supporter of the president. Rivas' support for President Trump making headlines after facing criticism, but leading some to support his business.
We saw on the news last night that they had some backlash supporting Trump, and so we thought we would come and support them.
One of the reasons that I want to vote for President Trump, he believes in law and order. And from someone like myself who came from El Salvador, a very violent country, law and order is very important for me.
Rivas is not alone. According to Pew Research, almost 20% of Hispanics are Republican, and an additional 10% lean Republican. Some of the main draws to the Republican Party, business and religion, especially issues related to abortion and traditional marriage. In 2008, Rivas tells us he voted for Barack Obama. But slowly, the party, he says, moved in a direction he couldn't follow.
The only choice that we have is to vote Republicans because they align more towards or with our moral values and the person that we are.
But for all that divides Americans, Rivas is proud of the life that he has built here.
My wife and I having come to this country at a very early age, speaking very little English, this country gives you the opportunity to educate yourself, give you the opportunity to work hard and get rewarded for it.
The pursuit of that American promise, the fuel for so many dreams and the bedrock of an entire economy.
I think that the immigrant mentality is go and build something. It takes a lot of work for us to be here, and when we're here, we want to leave our mark. And a lot of times that happens through small business.
When we come back, Latinos taking center stage from the Super Bowl halftime show to Bad Bunny.
From music to movies to TV, the Latino influence now a global phenomenon. Finally tonight, Latinos are leading something of a cultural revolution in the U.S. and around the world. All you need to do is look and listen. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Big names like Pitbull and Romeo Santos prove it's more than a movement and hotter than a trend. taking over the entertainment industry.
We bring so much to this country.
There is no fear right now in the Latinx culture.
And now, even politics. We see Latinos commanding big stages, like the Super Bowl. Latinos! And flexing power in the music industry. Jennifer Lopez and Maluma gracing Billboard's 2020 Latin Power Players issue. Just last year, Spotify's Viva Latino playlist growing 5 times faster than any other playlist. A cultural moment crystallized by creators like Lin-Manuel Miranda, who received award after award not just for Hamilton, but also for the musical In the Heights, which explored Latino culture in New York City and got him his first Tony.
This is for Abuelo Wisin and Puerto Rico. Thank you.
And the numbers don't lie. Cuban-American pop artist Camila Cabello and Puerto Rican reggaeton sensation Bad Bunny both hitting top 5 in Spotify's most streamed category last year.
At first, they didn't get it. It was very difficult to program a bachata tune in Anglo radio stations. That's not the case now.
Stars like Becky G defying the odds, finding international success.
We're so hardworking, and I think that we're tired of being disrespected.
Latino cultural contributions running deep in America, spanning generations. In just a few years, Latinos across the world have expanded their reach, and while the community has a long presence in the U.S., recognition for their cultural contribution has been stagnant.
I think that anyone that right now doesn't tap the Latin potential is going to lose.
That's what I'm talking about.
Businesses now noticing that Latinos represent a lucrative audience. The Latino Donor Collaborative reporting that as of 2018, the U.S. Latino GDP is the fastest growing market in the U.S., $2.6 trillion strong.
Of course.
Latino spending power most evident in music, as Latino artists continue to generate millions of streams and dollars in the U.S.
We blend and we mix with other cultures. This is great because it kind of helps Latin artists get out of that box where sometimes we get placed.
Even with some success stories, actress Justina Machado says cultural recognition is still far from complete.
There weren't a lot of people when I was growing up on television or in films that I could grasp onto and say, oh wow, that's like me.
Machado, a veteran Latina actress with 20 years in the business, says Hollywood can do more.
I'd like to see more of our stories. I'd like to see more of us on network television.
Hello, America. And while Latinos have graced the small screen for decades, like in I Love Lucy,
I'm gonna be a father,
and star in modern-day comedies like Ugly Betty,
what was your first impression of me?
Latinos are still left out when it comes to recognition. This year's Emmys marking the 6th time Latinos went without nominations in any major category.
Here we go.
Snubs, like for One Day at a Time, triggering outrage in the community.
The problem right now is that we have this huge pot of talent, and there's just not that many roles. You know, the few Latinos that we do have out there, they're still not getting nominations.
While limited, Latinos have won some recent visibility. Since 2013, 3 Latino directors have won Best Director at the Oscars, and Pixar's Coco smashed records, becoming one of the highest-grossing animated films of all time.
This isn't a dream then.
And some shows featuring Latino families have found a home on prime time.
How have you seen the industry change over all these years that you've been working in Hollywood?
A lot of the stories that are being told are now being told with us. We're seeing the Latinx people in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the writer's room, and having a say in these stories.
The young kids who are breaking into this business right now, do you think they're doing anything differently?
These young Latinx artists, and I'm just blown away by them, because they have no fear. They know who they are, they're grounded. So to be able to see a new generation just living their best lives and receiving everything that they're getting gives me hope.
A thriving community hungry for a piece of the pie in Hollywood, now looking to grab a slice of DC.
Little Joaquini or Jimena or Little Sky or Little Sage, they deserve those inspirations to see somebody who looks like them. achieve their dreams.
U.S. Representative Tony Cardenas says he's hard at work to ensure the Latino experience is reflected in American history.
Well, in 2004, it was the first time the United States Congress actually moved an initiative forward, and it got through. I made a speech on the floor of the House of Representatives when we finally got that bill to the floor after 10 years of trying. And it was a very emotional moment for me. And I got to talk about the history of people that I've looked up to. Dolores Huerta, the astronaut, Jose Hernandez. These are the kinds of stories that need to be told.
Now Cardenas is spearheading the effort to make the next Smithsonian Museum on the National Mall one that honors the Latino community.
The point is to inspire, to give people something to look at and say, hey, that person looks like my tío, or my tía, or my grandpa, or my grandma. And then all of a sudden say, hey, they can do it, I can do it too.
Today, Cardenas says the bill is in the Senate's hands and believes Americans must vote if we want to make the museum a reality.
Having representation everywhere is really important. Everybody in the room, you should be able to look around and see America.
So the message is clear. With Latinos being the largest minority group eligible to vote, your vote matters.
Vote for those who can't.
Yo voto.
Yo voto.
Vayan a votar.
La historia americana es nuestra historia.
Thank you so much for joining us for this ABC News Live special.
Remember, Election Day is November 3rd. Early voting is already underway in all 50 states.
For Cecilia and Tom, I'm John Quinones. Good night.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.